Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're really excited to have this meeting, our June 2020 meeting. Actually, this is the launch of our electoral season because the next 4 months are it. This is the big show. This is what we have to do the next 4 months. It's all just, as they say, excuse me, balls to the walls to get Trump out. And we are really absolutely honored to have Ezra here for this meeting. It was going to be our lunch anyhow, but how timely to have Ezra here joining us for it. So thank you, Ezra, for joining us. I'm just glowing that you're here with us and do this. For some of you who might not know a little bit of the context and the history, because some of you are joining us and are fairly new, and thank you for joining the resistance. Ezra founded Indivisible as a Google Doc somewhere around November in 2016, like maybe November, maybe November 8th or 10th or something. There was a brief mention of it in a Newsweek article. Google Doc crashed, the website crashed, and now it is not just an organization, it is a movement. Yeah. And we are part of it. We have always been part of it. We are thrilled to be an Indivisible group, and it's a movement that is absolutely making change. Sound. And so that's our fearless leader, Ezra. I'd like to introduce my team leaders to you, Ezra.
Great, please.
Yeah, because we have the most wonderful team. I'm really happy to be working with them. Jayan.
Hi, Ezra.
Was a team leader for Indivisible California 29, and we merged shortly after the California Summit last year.
Great.
She brought it herself, which is wonderful, and a bunch of her team members. We've been much stronger since we did that. Diana Brown is our project manager, and Carolyn Minder, and wonderful organizer with us. She is in charge of our letter writing campaign. Les Hartzman is basically our biggest, can I say this, anarchist advocate?
I'll take that.
keeps us on the straight and narrow for what we're really about. Anita Lee is our PR person, and she's just done a wonderful job. You saw some of that with the Defund the Hate program. Kenshi is our newest member. He has been great in setting up our website and our social media and everybody else. Who am I missing?
Eileen.
Austin has been with us from the beginning, and also is a liaison with a lot of our elected representatives. That's all I want to say. I'd like to move into what the crux of what we're here for. I know that we sent you a lot of topics that we want to cover, but I would like to ask you if there are things that you really are on fire to tell us.
Carolyn, do you mind if I interject first to ask everyone to mute themselves while
I'm sorry, I forgot that. Yeah.
No problem. If everyone can mute themselves while Ezra's speaking, and afterwards we can, if we have time, we'll have questions. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll wrangle them. And either if you want to ask Ezra them when I call on you, that's great, or I will if you prefer. So that would be great if everyone can mute themselves and we can get going.
Great. Well, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, it is great to be with you all tonight. I wish I could be there in person. I'm wearing my Indivisible swag, of course. I really wish I could be out there with you all. Lee and I'm calling in from the living room where Lee and Leah's in the background, so if you shout, she'll probably hear you. Where Lee and I wrote the Indivisible Guide 3.5 years ago. So in some ways, this the COVID quarantine has brought us back to our roots. We are yet again organizing from the living room. So on my list is, I'm happy to talk about the current protests against police brutality and the murder of Black men and women across the country. I'm happy to talk about the COVID catastrophe and the legislative response. I'm happy to talk about, obviously, the kickoff that y'all are doing now and that I'm seeing across the country preparing for the general election. And I'm also happy to talk about what happens after the election, because Donald Trump is saying right now that he's not going willingly, regardless of the results of the election, and we're preparing for that as well. So all that's on my list. I think I've been joining a whole bunch of Indivisible group, regional and statewide meetings like this, and I love doing it. I think the big benefit for you all is less hearing me drone on and on about things that were on my plate and more having a back and forth, a Q&A, so that you all can ask me what we're seeing across the country. So I could open up with just a few thoughts if you'd like, but I'd like to make this as much Q&A as possible because you all are experiencing things on the ground. Maybe you have questions about what's happening, and I'm happy to be an open book, tell you everything I'm seeing. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And I just got off of this incredible Indivisible with some national partners put together a incredible countrywide rural gathering, rural summit over the course of the last few days. And so some of my remarks were influenced by what I talked about there. But I just want to kick off right now with acknowledging the moment that we're in, which is this moment of huge, enormous potential and also tremendous ongoing pain, loss, trauma, and a reckoning right now with the kind of country that we're in. You all have been with Indivisible from the beginning, from that painful event we went through in November. And that means you remember, just like I remember, that was a time when the future was really scary and uncertain too, right? 4 years ago, Trump's election, it felt unimaginable, and then the future felt so dark. When he was elected, we all had to take a really hard look at what kind of country could elect this man, this white nationalist, this open xenophobe, this sexual assaulter, this incredibly corrupt, incompetent buffoon, allowed him to get into office. And, we all know that it wasn't just Trump came out of nowhere. We know that the problem, we've talked about this repeatedly, I've talked about with many of you here on this call, that the problem isn't just Trump. That if Trump were just the problem, he would have been rejected by the GOP. If he was the problem, he would have been turned out of office by now. They would have actually called witnesses, for instance, at the trial in the Senate. Of course, that hasn't happened. And that's why the work that we are doing in this moment is not just to beat Trump. We're here to eliminate the forces that allowed Trump to rise. And that's white supremacy. That's systemic oppression. And that's a government that responds to the interests of big business and donors, but not its own people. We are 4 months plus into a pandemic now that has killed 120,000 plus people. It's reshaped, obviously, the fabric of all of our lives. And I think I know Indivisible National has been personally impacted by this. I can bet that there are folks on this call who have been personally impacted, to have their lives upended by it, who have lost friends or family, or just who are still processing the enormity of all of this. Leah has a good rap on this that I'm going to steal here, but I'll credit her. She talks about how people responded after Hurricane Katrina. Somebody smart said that there's no such thing as a natural disaster. Yeah, there are hurricanes, there are earthquakes, but the extent to which those kind of natural events actually are disasters for a community, that's really determined by the kind of society that you've set up. Earthquakes happen all over the world, obviously, but the extent to which they kill people in your community is a function of the infrastructure, your building codes, your emergency responders, your healthcare system. It's not the natural disaster that kills people. It's the failure of societies to actually protect their people. And that's what we're seeing right now with COVID, right? For the last 4 months, this pandemic is happening everywhere, but its impact in the US is massive because the incredible failure of not just the Trump administration, but the entire infrastructure that we've set up in this society that makes people vulnerable and disposable. And of course, we know that we didn't get here by accident. It's just something we've wandered into. Our society has prioritized profits over corporations. Profits for corporations over wages and workers forever. We've underfunded the agencies that are here to protect us. We've deregulated the industries that exploit us. We gutted our safety net. The list goes on. So We've got the kind of country now where just a stunning number of people are just one or two paychecks away from a disaster. And when a disaster hits, we have nothing set up to actually support them. And of course, I'm talking to you now, and at the same time that we're in the middle of this COVID pandemic, we are simultaneously in the middle of this historic reckoning with police violence and white supremacy. Not just coming out of Trump, but spurred by this powerful, incredible, vibrant, moving nationwide uprising. And of course, all of these things are connected. We know that white supremacy is what allowed Donald Trump to get elected in the first place. We know that that's what's shaped our country. It's shaped its institution, and it drives who lives and dies in this pandemic. But what we're seeing as people pour into the streets and they're demanding justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Tatiana Jefferson and so many more that I can't mention, is that the lives that have lost to police violence and the lives that are lost to the COVID and the lives that are lost to the institutions that are so poorly created and structured for the people, these fights are all interlinked. And the only way we're going to get out of all this mess is if we stand up together and fight together. So I am thrilled that I am the only thing right now standing in between y'all on the launch of your program. And I want to get to that because we've got to hold two things in our collective heads at this moment in time. One is that the problems are much, much deeper than just this one election, just Trump, just Mitch McConnell. Those are huge problems. And obviously that is big, but we do need something much more than just, we need people to vote in November. We have these institutions that were just never designed to represent or protect all of the American people, and specifically designed to not protect people of color and Black people specifically designed around excluding Black people from power. You can see this white supremacy openly on the surface of the Republican Party. We have Donald Trump tweeting out videos of people yelling white power and no response from the rest of the GOP. Sure, he takes it down after people call him out on it, but let's not kid ourselves. And we shouldn't also kid ourselves that this is only a GOP problem. There are politicians out there with D's next to their name who are fine with the way things are. So in all of these places, we're seeing violent oppression. We're seeing out of control police. We're seeing systems that are killing people instead of protecting them. And we have a long way to go to actually produce the kind of profound transformation we need to make sure we've got the kind of country where people are actually free, actually safe. So right now, in this moment, the movement for Black Lives sees that much of the greatest opportunities for reform right now are around defunding the police and investing in communities. And that's a fight largely at the county, the city, the local level. And that's aside from the work that we're doing in response directly to COVID, aside from the work we're doing in response directly to this election. This is work that can be done right now. And it's not work that's about just showing up at one rally or just making one specific ask. This is work that requires relationship building across the movement, long-term relationship building rooted in actual solidarity, about educating ourselves, about figuring out what the long-term arc of justice looks like and where Indivisibles fit into it. And so right now it's our job to show up in whatever way that we can in our own communities, because look, solidarity is what Indivisible is all about. It's a synonym. We believed when we started Indivisible that it was important for us to stand one with those under threat, because the alternative was to wait our turn to lose, to wait our turn to be targeted ourselves. The only way we were going to win was by treating an attack on one like an attack on all. That's one thing that we have to hold in our head. It's not just enough to have people vote. The other thing is exactly what you're focused on today, which is, sure, it's not enough just to vote, but this election is incredibly important for the future of the Republic. I flat out do not believe American democracy will survive another 4 years of Donald Trump. I don't think it's going to work. I think he will do untold damage in the months following his reelection. I think the GOP will take this as evidence that his agenda is supported by the public. I think he will systematically dismantle what democratic institutions we have left. So building a wave, and not just building a wave, but building an enormous wave in this election that represents a rebuke of this administration and everything it stood for, is fundamental to any future survival of this country. I said I wasn't going to drone on a lot, and I just gave you a whole bunch of things. So I do want to stop there, but I'm happy to talk about what I'm seeing at the national level, talking to indivisible groups everywhere, and also what we're seeing from national organizations. We sit at a lot of tables that are doing organizing around the election, doing organizing around preparation for if Donald Trump refuses to leave office, and organizing around not just what happens this week, not just what happens in November, but what are we doing in 2021 where we've got a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president. And we've got this limited window of opportunity to actually get stuff done. How are we going to hit the ground running? Because I can tell you, once it's January 2022, all of the Democratic senators, all the Democratic representatives are going to be thinking purely on how do I get reelected? They're not going to be thinking about how do I pass legislation. So we have this brief window of opportunity starting January 3rd of 2021 and going forward for the next 11 months to actually get some stuff done. And we've got to take advantage of that. Otherwise, we're not going to have another chance. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop there. Let's dive into questions. Let's make this as much of a discussion as possible.
Okay, great. So thank you, Ezra. I'm going to go into the questions. I'll ask everyone. I can ask them. You can ask them. Let's just keep it brief so we can get as many questions answered as possible. Deborah, do you want to ask your question, or would you like me to? You are all muted, by the way. So if you want to ask, you should unmute yourself.
I'll go ahead and ask.
Okay, great.
To hear more about, here, let me turn my camera on. I'm having, whoops. Okay, and Mickey the cat is here. Let's see, I want to hear more about the Protect the Results project. Yep. And also whether Indivisible somehow work on being in coalition with groups who want to put teams of people at polls to help protect voters from harassment, and to maybe use apps to track exit voting, voter suppression, and poll tapes so that we have data that is admissible in court for challenging funky numbers.
Great questions. And actually, I realize I didn't call her out, but is Nina on the line right now too?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just no camera.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure you were here, Nina. Nina is fabulous. She's awesome. She's your local national organizer. So I might kick some things to her to follow up with. So for instance, particularly on the second part of your question there, Deborah, I know we have something, but I want to give her the details on it so she can follow up with you on it. But Nina is your point of contact for Indivisible National for all things. If there's something you think I should be doing or Leah should be doing or National should be doing that would be more helpful to you all to do the organizing you are currently doing, you should be letting Nina know, and she can work it through the system. So hopefully we can help out. So just wanted to preface everything with that. But so the question was on Protect the Results. This is a campaign that Indivisible launched first with Stand Up America, which is another grassroots organizing organization that we've worked with on democracy issues over the past 3.5 years. The goal of Protect the Results is in the name. We think there will be an election on November 3rd. We believe that Donald Trump ultimately will lose that election if the results are actually abided by. And we also believe that Donald Trump has spent the last 3.5 years systematically dismissing our norms and undermining democratic institutions and arguing that they don't apply to him, and that the Republican Party has backed him up every single step of the way. We need a peaceful transfer of power after the election results come in. And so the point of Protect the Results is to do two things. One is to build up the grassroots power that we need in that moment. So on November 4th or November 10th, whenever the results are counted, because there's going to be wide-scale vote by mail that, frankly, much of the nation is not yet prepared for. When the results are counted, in the event that Donald Trump refuses to go along with the results, in the event that there is clear evidence of foreign interference or malfeasance at the state level, in the event there is any sign that the results have been tampered with or are being ignored by the GOP or Trump, there is mass public pressure in that moment. We think that is going to be an absolutely necessary component to ensuring there is the peaceful transfer of power. Now, that's part of the goal. The other part of the goal is we can prepare ourselves for this. And when I talk to Indivisible groups all around the country, they are worried about this already. I'm not telling you anything you don't know here. I will say the media is not yet prepared for this. And the way the media has engaged with Donald Trump breaking norms over the last 3.5 years is first Trump makes a joke, then he sticks a toe in the water, and then he just does it. And the media is not prepared to actually contemplate what this guy is doing to our democratic institution. So part of the goal of this campaign is to get folks who are influencers in the media who do write on Donald Trump or do write on elections to start contemplating the idea that, hey, this guy might actually try to stick into power. And this allows us to help craft the narrative in that moment that will be really important if we're going to have elected officials and other elites stand up in the way we want. Now, there is another piece of this that Indivisible, we are in communication with the folks who are doing it, but we're not the ones who are taking the lead, which is, yes, we need grassroots power. Yes, we need elite media covering this in an informed way, but we also need elite Republicans and elite conservatives to also say in that moment, hey, I went this far, but the election is the election, and now it is time for this peaceful transfer of power. That traditionally has not been Indivisible national sweet spot, but know that there are other groups who are working to line up those pieces as well. The point is, we need to protect the results to ensure that democracy survives. In the event that we have an election result that either has clearly been undermined or that Trump tries to ignore, it might be the last kind of election result we've got. To the second part of your question, Deborah, there have been various efforts to plug grassroots leaders, including Indivisible groups, into poll workers, and there's been a big demand for poll workers from a few different organizations. Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights is one of the leading organizations nationally that has been running an effort on this. So I don't want to totally pass the buck on this, but I'll just commit to following up with Nina so she can pass more information on to the program that they're running. Indivisible does a whole bunch of stuff, but we don't do everything. And so a lot of the ways that we show up in the world is by partnering with other groups that are taking the lead on things. We're not the lead on producing poll workers, but there are other good groups that are doing that. So there are probably opportunities to engage there. And probably if I'm going to answer a lot of questions, I shouldn't give 15-minute answers. So I'm on that. Yeah.
No problem. Janine, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to ask your question?
Oh,
Let me unmute you. Oops, I can't unmute you. There you go. I'm trying. It won't let me do it. Sorry. There we go. I had it. Yeah, it's having a tough time. Sorry about that. Hold on one second. Can you unmute yourself, Janine? Because I'm not able to do it from here. Yeah, it's not working for me. All right, well, I apologize for that.
Well, there she goes. Go ahead, Janine.
Got it? Okay. Go for it, Janine.
Oh, okay. Ezra, thank you very much. Thanks, Carolyn, for inviting me. Ezra, I'm another group leader here called Stand Strong LA. Thanks for the guide. I jumped on it early on, and what drew me was the congressional meeting. So I've become a coordinator for our coalition to meet with the senators and beyond. My question from my group is, how is Indivisible interfacing with Black Lives Matter, if at all? That's the first question.
Yep.
And the second question is, oh, by the way, I'm on a committee with the elections, and that's not totally clean here. We just had a meeting about the poll workers coming and so on, so we're on it here. Carolyn knows about that too. But anyway, the second question would be, are you going to be assisting in any kind of media campaign for Biden or on behalf of the Democrats also? Are you going to be putting up any national ads? That was the other question. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. So first question, yes, we are working with the Movement for Black Lives. If you've been following Indivisible National's Twitter feed or Facebook account or just the website where we put up resources, the way we've been responding in this moment is not to try to be the strategic leader in this moment. That's not our role. Our role is to partner with the organizations who are actually representing the communities that are directly under threat and figure out how can we help provide people power to those existing movements that have been fighting this fight for a long time. So if you look up the Indivisible resources in this moment, for instance, that's why you see us trying to mobilize people around defunding police in order to invest in communities around the country. And that's the ask that we're getting from the Movement for Black Lives. That's the ask that we're getting from other organizations like Color of Change, and the groups that have, again, been doing this work for a lot longer than Indivisible has. It's more or less the same approach, for instance, that we've taken to the fights against Trump's anti-immigrant xenophobia. We partner with National Immigration Law Center and United We Dream, and other immigrant rights organizations that actually represent immigrants who are under threat. We're not the ones who are going to come and say, this is the immigration policy, we need to all go in this direction. We're partnering with the folks that are actually experts in this and have the legitimacy to set that strategy. So yes, we're both on the mobilization efforts and on the policy agenda. We're in close coordination. Our policy folks are in coordination with the Movement for Black Lives folks. Does that answer that part of the question, Janine? Oh, you're on mute, but I'm going to assume it's great. Okay, I'm going to go on to the second one. If it doesn't, though, feel free to ask a follow-up. The second one was about, are we running media campaign work with the Biden campaign? One thing I will say, so Indivisible National endorsed Biden, and the way we did that was by putting out a vote to everybody in the Indivisible movement after the primary was over. As I've said many times, Biden was, for most people in the Indivisible movement, not the first, second, third, or fourth choice. And also, it was a 95% approval vote to go forward with the endorsement of Biden, because I think just about everybody in the Indivisible movement understands that Joe Biden is George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and FDR all rolled into one compared to Donald Trump. It's not close. So we are behind him. We have produced videos saying more or less that. We are mobilizing our people around that basic concept in the key battleground states. We are running some ads, but that's more targeted. We don't do national ads. Indivisible's national sweet spot is not that. We're not like the Lincoln Project or the Democratic Party or other groups that do run big national ads and do media buys. That's not our unique sweet spot. What we're able to do is mobilize folks in communities where other people aren't necessarily mobilizing. So look to rural Wisconsin or Arizona or Colorado, where we have groups and we're able to empower them. That's what we're mainly focused on doing. There's a media component to that, but I wouldn't say we're the leading media producer in the country trying to get Biden elected.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna move on to Janie's questions. Janie, if you want to ask them, can you unmute yourself since I'm having some issues here? And please ask, and if not, I'm happy to ask the questions.
Hi, so my question is about facilitating millennials getting into Indivisible groups. We see them active in BLM, we see them active in FFF for climate crisis, and I'm trying to think of whether there's something in particular that Indivisible could do to facilitate that particular age group.
So I have a wrap in general on the question of how do we get X type of person or group to join our Indivisible group. And I think it's actually, I tend to try to redirect it to a different strategy, which is how are you reaching out to groups and showing up for the things that they care about? So this applies if you're trying to get millennials. This applies if you're trying to build partnership with communities of color or with immigrant communities. I don't ask groups, you know, how have you gotten people to come to your meetings? It's really which groups that represent millennials, represent immigrants, represent communities of color are you working with on the ground? What issues have you worked with them on? We see Indivisible groups in the South working with Black Lives Matter local chapters to take down Confederate monuments. We see Indivisible groups in Texas working with United We Dream local chapters to fight against the internment of and separation of families. We've seen Indivisible groups partner with the March for Our Lives local chapters to fight against fight for gun violence prevention efforts. So I think that the key to building coalitions that are long lasting is to find the groups that are active in your area and show up and offer support. when around specifically millennials, or this is actually even younger than millennials, Generation Z, around March for Our Lives, what we saw was Indivisible groups were partnering with the local March for Our Lives chapters to register voters outside their high schools when they were doing walkouts. That was a good way to start building partnership. They offered services, the March for Our Lives chapters liked it, and they were able to actually work on something productive together. So what I would be looking for is that I wouldn't necessarily have in your mind the goal of how can we have a millennial chapter of Indivisible in this community. Sometimes those form and sometimes those don't. You're not going to have a ton of control over that, but you do have control over what kind of partnerships you form with the existing organizing that's going on in the community for whatever group that you're trying to organize with. Does that make sense, Shane?
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and that's a good idea. And it kind of relates to what my second question was, which is our group, Indivisible Media City, have been partnering with a group in Kentucky. Getting rid of Mitch McConnell is one of our pet peeves. So we did a garage sale and some other fundraising to pay for a billboard, which Indivisible Kentucky was wanting to do.
Yep.
And so I guess my question is, there's a lot of groups, especially in California, with special skills, especially media-related skills, especially in the LA area. And it would be really interesting if there were a concerted effort to partner groups who have skills and people with groups in red states, especially, who are either lacking the people power or maybe the skills, or maybe just need somebody to pat them on the back and show them that we support what they're doing. And I was wondering if there's any type of effort in that direction.
So I've seen it happen organically throughout the movement. I know some of the Massachusetts Indivisible groups were partnering with the Kentucky groups as well on the Ditch Mitch effort and continue to. And some of that is happening. I've seen Indivisible groups decide to adopt a congressional district that has a competitive race and has another active Indivisible group in that district and volunteer their time and capacity to help that Indivisible group. I think that's great, and this is a great thing to ask Nina about. If you say, hey, we really care about getting rid of John Cornyn in Texas, we want to help the Indivisible groups in Texas, what can I do? We can help facilitate connections between some of the leaders in Texas and you all, so you can figure out what they need. Again, I would defer to what the Texas groups need. I wouldn't tell you, well, you got to do X, Y, or Z, because they're going to have a better idea of what they need than I do. But by all means, work with Nina on identifying those connections within the Indivisible movement. It's one of the things that I think the reason why Indivisible National exists in part is to create these connections across the movement. We do a ton of that at the local and state level to coordinate the Indivisible groups there, but we also try to do that across national. That's why we hosted this rural summit over the weekend, explicitly to connect Indivisible group leaders from all over the country from rural areas so they could share best practices and support each other.
Cool.
I'm going
Well,
to tap in here really quickly on this specific topic because Janie and I actually, one of our first conversations we had a couple weeks ago, we chatted about this, and I just emailed Janie about this, but I'm excited to be able to talk to everyone about it, that, you know, I've been working with our organizers in red states and red districts, and there's a ton of buy-in for this effort. And I'm actually talking with our organizers in Colorado and Arizona this week to identify how a couple of groups in California, like Janie's, that have offered up some help can help with the Martha McSally effort, and also with some congressional seats in Colorado. So this is definitely something we're moving on, and there is an effort happening, and it kind of all started with this original offer that Janie made, and with the original effort that her group made independently with the group in Kentucky. And for those who haven't seen the billboard, I definitely encourage you to take a look at it. The design is absolutely hilarious. It's a really great effort, and it's a beautiful example of how two groups that are 2,000 miles away from each other are able to accomplish something truly, truly spectacular.
That is so great to hear. Yeah, that is really great. I mean, we want as much coordination like that within the movement is possible. And just to give you a peek behind the curtain, so Nina is covering Southern California. We have a statewide organizer in Arizona. We have a statewide organizer in Colorado who similarly are building the same kind of connections to the indivisible groups in those states that Nina is building with you all. So the whole point of having that kind of infrastructure is so we can kind of facilitate both help within the states, but facilitate this kind of cross-movement coordination.
Great. Carolyn, I think the next question is yours about Brad Sherman. Do you want to ask that?
Sure. Yeah. We know that since you're based in DC, you have a lot of opportunity to directly interface with the members of Congress while they're there. Brad Sherman is poised to potentially chair the Foreign Affairs Committee. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering what your relationship is with him. You know how we've been working with him, but I wanted to know what your relationship is with him.
Sure. I mean, Brad Sherman's a famous kind of piece of work, right? He is difficult to work with. He is a little bit of a bully, domineering. I don't know if the Indivisible. So we have folks on the policy team who do work directly with members in Congress. I do know that he hasn't been a first call for us for many issues. We have many friends on Capitol Hill. He is not somebody who I think of as partnering regularly with the Indivisible movement to push forward Indivisible movement's priorities. I think there's a lot of good you can do by being in his district and putting pressure on him directly, even if he's difficult to work with, even if he seems like he's ignoring you. He is in a quote unquote safe Democratic district. It is also a not majority white Democratic district, and he should be worried about a primary challenge from an actual progressive. Whether or not y'all want to get behind a primary challenge, he should be worried about something like that. And that should make him more receptive to the power that you are building, which is all to say, I think you all are going to have a better time pushing than we will at the national level, because he's going to be worried at the local level about what exactly is happening in his own backyard.
He is, but you know that he has reached out to us because of he's recognizing our status in the Indivisible community, and he's very interested in that.
Which is great.
And so is there some way we can push him to interface more directly with you guys? Would that be useful?
It's quite possible that it would be. I think we should continue working together on this. And if it does indeed look like he's going to chair the committee, or if there are specific asks that you all have for him and you want to be connected with folks at the national level in his federal office, that's something we could do. I think the next step on that, just to figure out direct next follow-up, would be for Nina. If we can check in with Angel or Mary. Mary's our legislative director. Angel's our national policy director. You might have heard from them at the national summit last year. Yeah. So if we could check in with them and see, are there specific asks we have for him? It might be relevant to his committee. It might not be. It could just be that he's a straggler on some issues and we need him to be to stand up a little bit more. I think it is a huge testament to the power that you all have built that he's actually reaching out, because he doesn't do things just to be nice. That's not who he is.
No, it's quite transactional.
Yeah, it's quite transactional, which is fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, if he gives you something and he recognizes your power, that he's actually seeing that, okay, the indivisible groups in my district want this, and they're going to be a huge pain in the butt if I don't do it. I guess I've got to do it, or at least say the right things about it. That's a win. So I would. I'm happy to, Nina and I can go back to Mary and Angel and see if there are specific asks, but I think the best thing you can do is your ask should be, you should have regular meetings with their district director. Hopefully they are meeting with you on a regular basis.
We have a good relationship with them.
Good. So if you've got regular meetings there, that keeps the lines of communication open. Figuring out ways, times when he does the right thing, to say, good job, you're doing the right thing. Positive reinforcement is helpful for those moments that are going to come when you have to actually push them on stuff.
All right, we'll keep talking. Thank you.
Yep.
I think we have time for one more question.
Can you see me?
Okay. So I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to actually jump over to sort of a positive end, if that's good for you guys. Bob, I was going to ask your question, unless you can ask it. And we can hear him. Oh, I think I'm going to ask Bob's question because I know he's had some tech issues with that. It says, I know we must not be overconfident.
Hold on. You can hear me now?
Yes, Bob, go for it. Ask your question.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm worried I have a weird sort of positive worry, which is that in light of the really great polls right now, everyone's talking about, okay, let's be careful. It's going to narrow and so forth. My way of looking at it is because it may happen that way or it may not. And my way of thinking about it is in a way more negative. I don't know whether you would call it positive or negative, but it's that we need a big win.
Yes.
Not a small win might not be good enough. Partly because of the protection issue. If it's the bigger it is, the harder it is to steal. And the other thing is just to really force the rethink that we need from people on the right, to really kind of humiliate them into sanity. So I'm just wondering if as we encourage people to volunteer and they may be tempted to go like, well, come on, this clown's not going to win. We say, okay, that's maybe most likely he won't. But, we have to have a huge victory for X, Y, and Z reasons to really, to save this country from not just from Trump, but Trumpism.
Bob, preaching to the choir. So one thing I will say, you're preaching to the broader Indivisible choir here too. Nobody who is involved in Indivisible will ever go through a 2016 election again like we went through, where so many people thought, this is in the bag. Are you kidding me? This guy is going to get elected? No way. And so obviously in 2016, we saw reduced turnout and reduced engagement from volunteers. That's not what I'm seeing in Indivisible National. I just got a request last week from our digital team to increase the amount of direct voter contact. So the get out the vote work that we're doing, because there's so much volunteer interest. They think we're going to blow through the numbers that we've got. So I am not seeing people take this for granted, and certainly my rap to Indivisible groups and everybody else is I don't believe the polls, and I assume we're losing right up until we win. I think regardless of what the poll says, to your point, I think they will pull every trick they can to prevent this from being a loss for them, and that's Trump, that's McConnell, that's the broader GOP, and in order for us to actually win, we have to build a wave so big that it makes it impossible for them to steal. We need to defeat Donald Trump, obviously, but we've got to retake the Senate. We've got to expand our size of majority in the House, and we've got to take state legislative seats so that we have more control after the census process goes through and there's redistricting this term around. So we are building towards a wave that we hope makes 2018 look small, and 2018 was the largest midterm margins in the history of the Republic. I think that's what we need right now.
And that's a great note to end on. Thank you, Suju. Thank you, everybody. We will keep these chat questions and maybe we'll forward them to Nina and see if we can get all the other questions answered, because we don't want to neglect any of your concerns. But I do want to release you, Ezra, because it is it's a lot of time, and once again, how grateful we are that you joined us and spent this time with us.
Anytime, happy to come back, or even better yet, you can get Leah back. She's better than I am anyway.
Okay.
So, I love doing these. Really enjoy hearing from you all what you're seeing on the ground. Enjoy sharing what we're seeing. The way we're going to get this done is by the kind of work that you're doing in Southern California right now. I want you to know, when I'm talking to Indivisible groups all over the country, I'm hearing the same thing. So I know you don't feel like you're alone, and you shouldn't, because you're not. There are Indivisible groups who are building up power like this all over the country. You're doing it in your own communities. You're doing it at the statewide level. And as we heard from Janie, you're also coordinating across the country. This is what gives me hope right now. This is the only thing that gives me hope. The reason why I believe that we are going to be able to build this blue tsunami is because of this work, directly because of this work. So I'm so honored and proud to be in this movement with you all. And so, happy to join anytime.
We'll take you up on that. Thank you.